Hey everyone, wanted to make a video. I've been seeing so much stuff on the internet about like capitalism and the man and how working class people are treated and how the system may or may not be changing in the future. Labor unions, um the 40-hour work week being changed to reduced to all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to talk about, like, I've spent so many hours of my life and years of my life reading about socialism, capitalism, everything from the Communist Manifesto to Pol Pot's agrarian communism that he learned in France, actually. And Trotsky, Stalin, and then all the other socialists. You got the modern Chinese Communist Party, you got the North Koreans, and then you have the Western world. And I think that I want to go through some main misconceptions about capitalism. Okay? Because man, I see a lot of kids, especially, yeah, like young people who haven't been in the working world as adults for very long, typically have these warped perceptions of kind of how it works from the management perspective and from the business owner's perspective. Um, Small companies, especially a lot of small companies, like at least my company that I worked for, like they're not cash mills. They're riding right on the borders of right on the margin. Okay, so I'll use my own industry as an example. I was working in aerospace manufacturing, and my company had about 100 employees, some of whom only a few made six figures. Nobody made minimum wage. Everybody made more than minimum wage because we have skilled, machinists and stuff. But I want to explain to you that labor is the main cost of almost every business. So the idea that the business owner is paying his people pennies and going on vacation with the money that should have gone to his people is not true at most small businesses. The owner doesn't have that kind of leverage because the economy is too competitive. The one thing you have to understand about the economy is that it's very, very competitive. And companies are at risk of getting constantly, and there's no mercy, there's no safety net. You have to make money. And making money is pretty hard because you have to be able to do a lot to make money on your own. Okay? So, I want to talk about basically the dichotomy because is on our anti-work, for example, reddit.com/r/anti-work. It's all about how the capital owning class has to fight against, or the working class has to fight against the bourgeoisie and the idle nobility. Most of them don't know the difference between the bourgeoisie and the nobility, but they lump them together, just peons versus elites. It's all the same socialism stuff. And man, I want people who think that it's just rich versus poor. It's not correct. Because I'm in the capital owning class and I don't pay wages out. And I don't do anything that I just sit here and write my fiction and stuff. Right? So you have to realize that somebody having money because they had a good job for a while and saved up or something, that doesn't mean that they're suddenly the enemy if they don't do anything to you know, exploit other people. So for me, yeah, I've benefited kind of from our system, but I hate it. Like, I hate working, but, I have job related skills. That's all you have to do is get a good in demand skill that people don't like to do. Anything like accounting, you know? If you're not smart enough to learn how to code, like me, I'm not. I mean, coding's hard, but dude, if you're willing to do some boring stuff, you can do accounting and stuff like that. And now suddenly, as soon as you're making real salary and you have a good 401k, you're the enemy now. Workers of the world unite never happened because that's not how it works. It doesn't make sense to say that the people with money are the enemy and the poor are the good guys and the poor need to fight the people with money because, okay, what happens the day after the poor take everything then? It's like that's how the Bolsheviks started. Okay, and then they take the money and then now they're the new enemies because they own the property. So unless you have complete communism, not even socialism where the state owns everything or the workers own everything, but you have like abolition of property rights, you're just going to end up, it's just an endless mill. You're exchanging one leader for another. It's funny because like there's philosophers who said this in the 1800s, like Nietzsche said, like the socialists, they just want to exchange one master for another. Which is why you end up with the Bolsheviks in charge, or Stalin in charge, or Tito in charge, or the Chinese Communist Party in charge. Because if you just make it poor versus rich, then as soon as the poor win and take the rich's money, they're the new rich. And then what? What do? Well, people on Reddit Antiwork envision, it's just funny because first of all, they envision the subreddit as a political movement, which is not true. It's just a bunch of people complaining on the internet. It doesn't do anything and it'll never change anything. So you can't start thinking that sitting around on Reddit is real political work. I made my YouTube video about political hobbyism, but you can't think that just because you're whining about political issues online that you're doing something or that matters. It's very easy for the people who run the world to just keep running the world while you complain on Reddit, making Reddit stock go up because you're using their platform. I think that the only way true change happens, because people are talking about, well, why are the bourgeoisie holding on to the system so hard? They're not. Most people are just trying to survive and get by, and people who carved out their own stake in the system obviously want to maintain the status quo. I don't, because I've always been very much like, more. I've always wanted our society to be the best that it can be. So if UBI makes us a better society, then let's have UBI. I don't have any like preconceived ideas of like, we can't do this even if it works because it's wrong. What works changes. It's a moving thing with history, with time, with technology, with what country you're in, with what the budgeting scenario is. The best decisions to make for governance fluctuate. But you can't get into this mentality, guys. The main misconception is that there is enough money to go around. And I challenge you, the people who think that it's just as simple as workers of the world unite and take everything, do the math. Please, I implore you. Every single billionaire in the world, add up all their money and then divide it by the amount of people there are in the world, or even just in the United States. If you, in the United States, the last time I ran these numbers, if you took every single American billionaire and killed them and took every single last penny of their money, sold all their shares, liquidated everything, and then disseminated it evenly among the people, how much do you think everybody would get? Every American would be able to get a check for about a couple grand. And then what? Most people would spend that couple grand on Super Bowl tickets or something else, and then that'd be the end of it. And then you're at the start again, which is what happens always. The main problem is that the people who don't... The main problem with wealth inequality, guys, is an inequality in education, really. Because if you're educated, you won't be poor unless you want to be, you know? Like me, I choose to write, but if I ever have to make money, I can. You need to get yourself in a situation where if you have to make money, you can. Now, I want to talk about minimum wage and all that. There's people on Reddit Antiwork talking about how horrible their minimum wage jobs are. And, you know, that's one of the few times where I just talk tough. Because there was somebody talking about how they were stacking cardboard boxes and only making $8 an hour. And they could barely even, like, survive with that. And I was thinking, yeah, you're stacking cardboard boxes. A monkey can do that almost. It's like you have to use your brain to work. You have to work smart. You can't, if you're just flipping burgers, you're going to make a barely a little tiny bit more than a robot. And that's only if you're a little bit better than a robot. And the government can't save you from that, guys. It's just reality. The only thing the government can do is just, I don't even know, force a guy to give you a job or do a planned economy. And just say like, okay, well, we're just going to have 800 burger flippers. You're a burger flipper. And then they just give you everything you need, like Soviet Union style. You're still not valuable. You're still just getting a handout from the state. In my opinion, it's better to just do UBI in that case. Just say, okay, replace the burger flipper with a robot. Let that burger flipper sit on his ass. Maybe he likes to do art. Maybe he likes to volunteer at the local YMCA. Who knows what he does? Doesn't matter. You pay him UBI. Instead of having these giant society changing, like trying to make the job perfect. Most jobs in the economy, this is what I like about Reddit Antiwork, is because they realize how dumb the whole system is. They realize that the whole system is just this gamified way of getting people to work, but it's obviously not very perfect. And it breaks down in a lot of cases. Like, I'm trying to explain, guys, that it's not as simple as just take the money from the man or eat the rich. If you eat the rich, you're going to be hungry again after a week, and there's not going to be any more rich to take the money from. So what then? The bottom line is that for all this consumerism stuff, look, these are Tums, okay? Because I have acid indigestion. Think about how much it takes. You have to think about how much work it takes. This is calcium carbonate, so it has to be made in a lab. It's got to be pressed into a pill. It's got to be put in here. There needs to be quality control to make sure that you're not poisoning yourself. And then it needs to be shipped to a supermarket. And then I need to actually buy it. And you start to realize that because things don't fall out of the sky, there's always going to be scarcity. And there just isn't enough to go around. Even if you eat the rich. Even if you eat the rich. And that's something that, like, in my opinion, Marx understood that. But a lot of socialists since Marx, I get the sense that a lot of socialists don't really read Marx. And really, I implore you, like, if you're, read Marx himself, the Communist Manifesto. It's still relevant. I love the Communist Manifesto, and I don't like commies, like, because you have to realize that Karl Marx, he was talking in the context of inevitabilities. It is inevitable, guys. Inevitable that our current system, with its extreme wealth inequality, will peter out and have to change because it's going to run up against a wall, right? It's dependent on infinite perpetual consumption of non-renewable resources. Well, that's mathematical, gonna run into a wall, right? It's dependent on perpetual increase in net GDP, perpetual growth. Well, might run up into a wall once there's, with climate change changing things and all that. There's just a lot of really fast changes that are going to result in a lot of really fast reforms. But you can't think it's capital versus non-capital. People, we're in it together. I think of it as people who care about society versus people who don't. And you can be a rich person who cares about society and treats their employees right and donates when they die, and maybe even makes their companies worker owned, Like, for me, I try to create worker equity whenever possible. But it's not always possible because worker-owned businesses often have a hard time competing because a lot of reasons. If you think it's just as simple as getting rid of the leeching elites and that elites don't do anything, just try to figure out why worker-owned companies don't kick ass. If the managers and the capital class and the shareholders are all useless, then worker-owned companies should be better and more competitive because they don't have to pay exorbitant salaries to a bunch of fat cat bigwigs, right? They don't have to pay the useless wages. And I'm just going to tell you guys, those CEOs who make millions of dollars a year, companies don't give them that money for fun. They don't want to give it to them, but they do because they're valuable. And if you don't understand why a CEO is so high paid, you should watch the Steve Jobs movie and just look at the character solely. Steve Jobs is CEO, or Apple's CEO during like some of their times. Like, that guy is worth a lot of money. So here's how I feel, guys. I don't like selfish people who harm society and don't care about their own externalities. The kinds of people who are going to cheat, right? The kinds of people who are going to cheat on their smog test, even something that simple, because they like to and they don't want to have to, they don't care about the smog rules. People who try to cheat, people who are rent seekers and who hurt everybody else and do stuff like that. And that can be rich or poor, guys. It can be the armed robber or the rapist down the street who doesn't have a dollar to his name. Or it can be someone like Elon Musk, some grifter who sells fake promises. Making the world as simple as capital owning versus non-capital owning just doesn't make sense. Just doesn't make sense because you can acquire capital. It's the bourgeoisie instead of the nobility. See, you have to understand that the bourgeoisie is not the nobility. Marx, the Communist Manifesto, is talking about the bourgeoisie. And you can't treat the bourgeoisie as if they're nobles, because they're not. So I think that people, if you don't want to look it up, the bourgeoisie is the merchant class, okay? It's the merchant class. And Marx's whole thing in the Communist Manifesto, if you read it, what he's talking about is how the merchant class now, especially because of publicly owned companies and stuff like that, is more powerful than the nobles. The bourgeoisie became more powerful than the nobles because they owned the shares for the Dutch East India Company. So the King of England is the King of England, or the Duke of York, now has less money than some East India Company fat cat. And that's what the bourgeoisie is. You can't treat them like the nobility because they don't get their money. They don't get their money from birthright. They get their money from trade and from the economy. And so the only way to fight them is through ownership laws, like means of production and stuff like that. So read the Communist Manifesto if you're a socialist. But I just want to close out the video with like key tips for like bringing about equality, because wealth inequality, I think, is one of the main. I think that wealth inequality is the only metric we should use for our economy. Most Americans shouldn't know what the GDP is. They shouldn't know what the unemployment is. They shouldn't know what average wage is. They shouldn't know anything except for the wealth inequality. Imagine if that was the metric we cared about. The richest, how much of the wealth does the richest 1% have, or the top 1%, the top 5%? What if that was the only metric we cared about? To me, that's true. Like, if you want to be a socialist, it's not enough to just tear down one bourgeoisie fat cat at a time. That'll never change the system because, as I said, it just grows back. Okay, so you take the axe, right? And you nix, boom. You take the axe and you equalize everything, and you give every worker an equal share of their company. Okay, 30 years later, it's gonna look again. It's gonna fall out of whack, out of balance. So there is no workers of the world unite. Workers of the world unite never happened, and there's a reason why it never happened, and it never will happen. People care about so much more than money, people. You got religion. Look at the far right, okay? Do they care about the bourgeoisie? No. They care about foreign religions and foreign ethnicities. They want to make sure America doesn't become Muslim. Where does that come in the Communist Manifesto? It's a complete oversimplification. It is absolutely not the capital owning class versus the poor. The poor can be, you can have a poor person who supports the Nazis and a poor person who's against them. And the idea that the people at the top are just puppeting and in control is not true either. They're riding the waves. Look at Fox News with Donald Trump. Fox News did everything it possibly could to stop Donald Trump. Remember the Katie Couric interview? Remember blood coming out of her wherever? Trump said, oh, she must be on her period. Because Fox was killing Trump in that debate. And remember when Trump boycotted Fox News and did a veteran raising thing instead because Fox News was being so biased against him? And then later on, Fox realized, okay, we tried to get rid of this Trump guy and couldn't. He beat Jeb Bush anyway. So they got on his side after that. And they're still kind of walking that line. But so is Fox in charge? Are they calling the shots? Are they the puppet masters? I see them as just serving their customer base. Giving their customer base what their customer base wants to see. They wanted to see Trump. It took Fox a little while to adjust to that. Because Rupert Murdoch doesn't like Donald Trump, of course. They're different kinds of people. They're different bourgeoisie. I wouldn't even call Trump bourgeoisie. I would call him idle nobility. More or less. But, I think that If you're a Redditor on Antiwork and you think that you're changing the world by being part of a subreddit, do you want to know what real political work would be? Moving to Wyoming. And it's funny because people say that they can't afford to survive. So then I say, well, if you can't afford to survive anyway, go live in the hills in Wyoming. And then they're like, well, I couldn't do that because I wouldn't have X, Y, and Z. And you realize that, yeah, we do actually. Most people who say they don't have anything have a lot of stuff that they spend a lot of money on. They just don't have any left over, so they feel poor. But it's like, okay, buy a tent and go live in Wyoming and vote for a Democratic senator. Oh, well, I can't do that because there's like all these excuses. It's like all the anti-work people could just move to Wyoming, live in the woods, eat fucking mushrooms and whatever, like food mushrooms, not magic mushrooms or magic mushrooms, and then just vote for vote for two senators who want to, I don't know, pass universal basic income. You know, and it's like you realize that people do have. It's like, how much are you willing to sacrifice? Change requires sacrifice. If there's any lesson I've learned from history, it's that change requires sacrifice. So for me personally, what am I willing to sacrifice? Well, I'm a minimalist and I sacrifice for that. Like, I don't engage in lifestyle inflation. I don't have fancy toys. I don't buy fancy toys and all that to show off. I don't have like fancy bling or anything like that. And then also though, guys, you have to be willing to do real actual work instead of just complain, because complaining doesn't do anything. The sooner you realize that complaining is a waste of time, man, let me tell you how that would change the world. If people just stopped complaining and started doing, man. But people don't know what to do because all anti-work really knows what to do is go after the rich people, and that doesn't work. They would kill all the rich, do some shitty socialist revolution, and end up the same way Vietnam, China, North Korea, end up the same way every country that's tried that did. Venezuela too. You just replace one set of fat cats for another. You replace the Tsar with the Bolsheviks. Cool. Good job. Doesn't matter. So, how do you actually promote change? I think that the best way to promote change is to get your ideas, like actually good ideas. Eat the rich isn't a good idea. You know? Occupy Wall Street, I would say, is a good example of the kind of movement that, like, Occupy Wall Street lived and died on whether or not it was a good idea, like whether or not occupying Wall Street is a good idea. And I think that if they had demonstrated a better understanding of the financial system and how it worked, they could have refined Occupy Wall Street. I would have said, but for me, like, I don't have much against Wall Street. Really, I just think that their industry, I've talked about the financial industry before, but their industry owns too much of the society's capital, but that's not really their fault. It's because of the way the Fed did everything and how our economy developed. Like, over half of the country's equity is in the financial system, and I think that that's like kind of like a lot of money to be, the bankers have too much money. The investment bankers have a lot of money. The VC firms have too much money. I agree with all that. That's why I want wealth inequality. Think about it. Imagine if wealth inequality was the only metric we used. Did it go up or down? Are Americans more equal or less equal in terms of how much the top 5% owns and how much the bottom 30% own? Those figures are worse than they have ever been right now since World War II, which is like almost as long as they've been tracking the data reliably. So the country is becoming less and less equal, and yet a lot of people think the economy is doing good because unemployment and GDP, that doesn't mean anything. Screw that stuff. So our anti-work is good. This is what you can provide, guys, as part of a movement, is a new lens, a new angle to look at things. Instead of looking at what the country made, let's look at how it was distributed. Did it all go to one man? Oh, well, that sucks. Did it go evenly to everybody? Okay, that's good. Or is it? Like, some people don't want equality. Some people want a meritocracy where, or something. For me personally, I think that a society's very stability depends on keeping the poorest people at least happy enough. And America does do that. That's why America never has any changes or revolutions, because we keep the poor just happy enough. And dude, once the poor start getting a little unhappy, the government moves fast, man. Look at COVID. As soon as it actually happened, where like COVID started threatening the system, suddenly our government's like that. They've got all this money, they've got all these laws, they've got all this, they've got all that. They're doing so much to help everybody. Where did all the money come from? Well, it was always there. Um so the main point of this video, if you're listening, is that, or Spotify, if you're listening, eating the rich will get you a nice dinner or two, but next week you're going to be hungry again and there aren't going to be any rich people. So what do? And then also, you should focus on, I think the most powerful thing is metrics. Getting people to care about metrics. If politicians have to answer to wealth inequality every time they run instead of just GDP, that will invite change. So bring those, think of new metrics. Think of cool new metrics. Like, for example, how long does it take someone, what's the average age for someone to pay off their college loans? That might matter more than the nominal, you know? And some things like inflation can be good. If you own a bunch of money in college loans, inflation's good for you, right? Because your loan doesn't go up with inflation. So if you own $100,000, if you owe $100,000 and then 5 years from now, $100,000 can only get you a pack of Skittles, well, suddenly now your college loan is a pack of Skittles. So we have to start thinking in terms of, we almost worship these numbers, guys. The capitalist class, like, you want me to start talking a little socialist for a second. They maintain their control through the metrics. Things like unemployment doesn't say anything about equality or what people are doing. You can get unemployment down to 0% in a slave society, okay? It just means that people are doing something, but what if everybody is digging holes and filling them back up again? Unemployment 0% and GDP is really high. It is. If you have someone, it's just a measurement of how much stuff changed hands. But if you zoom out, none of it really matters. Like, there's very little value to a lot of the jobs out there. I'll use an example well, by very little value, what I mean is that a lot of jobs exist just for the sake of being a job and someone having something to do. For example, in Oregon, they have the gas people, the guys who do your gas pump, because you're not allowed to pump your own gas in Oregon. Someone has to do it for you, a gas station attendant, because it used to be dangerous in like the 30s or something. And, that's just like a job that that person has. And a lot of people think that as automation gets stronger and stronger, jobs that humans can do are going to become more and more like that, like wasteful. And to me, I always thought, well, why not just send that guy home, tax gasoline, and give him UBI? The technology of a safer gas pumps eliminated the gas pump attendant jobs. And so you just tax gas and then give them, you just charge a little extra to cover whatever their wage used to be and then give them their old wage back through UBI. That's how I think. But other people, guys, there's this like worship of work. There's these ideas of idle hands are the devil's plaything, and that people should have jobs just to be better off. And I'll say, guys, I think that that's outdated. Idle hands were the devil's plaything before the internet, but now you have you can do anything. What you have the Library of Congress sitting on your desk. You have all kinds of everything sitting around all the time. You look at what people produce with idle hands, like wonderful art, wonderful technology. You go on GitHub, you look at some of the ideas there. People can learn all kinds of skills with idle hands too. So, maybe that gas station attendant, imagine this. If Oregon, that gas station attendant, you let people pump their own gas. Oh no, his job's gone. What if he goes on the internet and learns how to do something even better? Idle hands aren't the devil's plaything at all. Only if you're a devil. Idle hands are the devil's plaything for the devil, but idle hands are also Jesus's plaything. It's all just this idea that people need to be kept busy just for the sake of being busy is such unmitigated bullshit. I'm sorry, everybody. And that's kind of where my pseudo-socialism comes from. Because even though I believe in a meritocracy, and I do believe that somebody who's coding versus somebody who's stacking cardboard, the person coding should make a lot more money because they're worth a lot more money and they produce a lot more money. I'm sorry, that's just how I look at the world. So I don't believe in equality, but I believe in equal dignity and equal opportunity. But I still don't feel bad for someone who is stacking cardboard, because humans can do so much more than that. And I know that if you're a human, you've got a big human brain and you can do more than stack cardboard. You just can. All you have to do is, hunker down and learn. Go online and learn some skills. And people say, well, not everybody can do that. Pretty much anybody can do more than stack cardboard boxes. I think that stacking cardboard boxes, those jobs are supposed to be, I think that young people should work those jobs. Every teenager, that's what I did. Every teenager should work hard labor so that you understand what you're working, why you're going to school. You're going to school so that you don't have to do that for the rest of your life. But I don't understand why people think, I want the cardboard stacker to get more money from the state because I think society's better off that way. But I don't think the cardboard stacker's employer should be chastised for not paying them a lot, because stacking cardboard isn't very valuable. So if I need someone to stack cardboard, I can't afford to pay $30 an hour for that. My competition will rip me apart. So you have to understand that a lot of it is supply and demand, guys. And if all you can do is stack cardboard, there's a lot more of you than there is demand for you. That's why you can't unionize. I guess I'll end the video with a short aside on labor unions. A lot of people think that unions are just this saving grace, this panacea to the problem. Well, remember what I said about replacing one master for another, okay? Read about Jerry Stoppa or whatever his name was. Once a union gets too big, it is its own problem. Once an organization gets too big, it suffers from the same issues that it did before. And labor unions, I think, can often be like extortionary clubhouses in a way. Like, people hate right to work and stuff, but it's like, it depends on what kind of skills you have. Because if you have skills that are conducive to being hired individually, then suddenly you don't want or need a union. But I will say that unions make it hard for non-members to get in. Unions increase the barriers of entry for non-members of the union and make it easier for union friends and family to get in. Like, I'm talking about like the GE Auto Workers Union. You know, it's like you have to like know somebody. You have to like be a family member of some auto union guy to get into their union. So what's that? That's not going to solve society. That's just more inequality. That's just one little group of workers for one little company staking out their spot and saying, we make $80 an hour now. But they're not helping society make $80 an hour. They're making cars cost way more so that the other people who work have to buy expensive cars now because they managed to extort their employer. Now, when labor unions are good, of course, is when the companies get out of hand. Everything is like a balance, you know? You can't water down the world. Like, I swear to you guys, if it was that easy, they would have done it. Like, so many people have tried to fix this problem. If it was as easy as just eat the rich, it would have worked in China, in Russia, in Vietnam, in Cambodia. Cambodia really ate the rich. Holy shit. And yet, it doesn't for a lot of reasons. So, we don't bring about socialism, guys. We don't bring about socialism by destroying capitalism. We bring about socialism by making it even better, making the system even better, and focusing on equality as a metric. So, hey, wealth inequality is really bad. How do we increase equality? And then you just go down the list by that and give people, you try to make it that disposition where people are thinking about equality. And then you're going to run into the problem where a lot of people don't really care that much about equality. I only care about the minimum. If you have a roof over your head and you're not starving, then that's it. I don't think you need to get any more than that. But, you know, I just believe in everybody getting a minimum. Universal basic income. I believe in it. But it's not because I think that, you know, the rich steal it all. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. So, man, I hope that I kind of rambled in this video. I hope that I got kind of some points across. The main thing is, like, if you're a socialist and you think if you believe in like eat the rich and everything, read the Communist Manifesto and understand it, because everything that you're talking about has been talked to death for the past like 150 years. And then also read on techno-socialism. And we have to encourage people to get better skills and stuff, you know? Like, if you're stacking cardboard and making minimum wage, instead of complaining about why your employer should pay you more or that the minimum wage is too high, you know, I do think that there has to be some element of responsibility of like, I'm a human being, so I need to work with my brain because that's what we have, and I need to do more than stack cardboard. Hate to say it, but there's like that element of truth to it also. But for me, you know, I know that I hey, you know, like I've had times where I can't survive, I can't function because I have panic disorder, bipolar, all that kind of stuff, and I was unemployed for a while and felt discarded and useless by the system because I just couldn't figure out how to function. So I think that our society needs to be better at helping people who fall off the wagon, you know? Because I fell off the wagon. And if you don't help someone get back on the wagon, you like lose a citizen with all their potential, you know? So it's better to, if people have, we're the richest country in the world, all right? So we can afford to have everybody at least have a place to live. It's disgusting to see homelessness in my country. We just have too much money for that stuff, you know? So don't let people pigeonhole you, because the Republicans will try to make you, they'll try to make you out to be, if you're to the left of Republicans, they'll make you out to be someone who doesn't believe in merit and wants everybody to get everything for free and just wants money to fall from the sky. And then Democrats, if you're to the right of them, will construe you as somebody who just supports the bourgeoisie, like a bootlicker. So Democrats will call you a bootlicker and Republicans will call you entitled. That's when you know you're in the right sweet spot. You're right in the middle. You want both sides to think you're full of shit, because that means that you're smooth sailing. So, working towards equality, everybody, but you have to do it within the real world. Within the real world. And in the real world, you have to be smart, you have to get skills, you have to think, you have to this and that. So yeah, cool everybody. Thank you.